of what the original dungeon would have been. At the height of the trials, they would squeeze up to 150 people in this space, wall to wall in all of the cells and covering the floors. To my right over here, this is one of the original support beams that they pulled from the excavation site back in 1956. And one of the first things you'll notice down here about the dungeon, other than it being cold and dark, is that all the cells are different sizes. This is because once you were arrested, you were expected to pay for pretty much everything. You paid for your room and board here. You paid for the iron shackles used to restrain you. You paid for any food and water that you got down here. If by the time the trials ended, you were hung, your family was responsible for taking care of the hangman's fee. If your family decided to visit you while you were imprisoned down here, you paid a visitation fee. And if you were lucky enough to come from a nice, wealthy family, you could afford a nice, cozy cell like this one over to the left over here. We would consider this cell an upper-class cell due to its size. You'll also be able to see a few of the other luxuries that they were able to afford, such as a straw bed, a blanket, and a chamber pot even. The cell directly across from me on this side of the wall over here is just an example of a torture cell. This just displays some of the various tortures that went on in the dungeon that the sheriff would use in order to get a conviction out of you, whether or not you were a witch, and if you could name anybody else as being a witch. They would do awful things such as pressings, whippings. There's an instance recorded of a young boy who had his thumbs tied behind his back down to his big toes and was left to hang there till he confessed to his crimes. So it's very easy to see how a lot of the people throughout the trials just immediately said, yeah, sure, I'm a witch, in order to get them to stop doing these awful things to you, and then hopefully naming a few of your neighbors' names and throwing them under the bus in hopes of avoiding execution. The smaller cell over on the left-hand side of the wall up there is just an example of a middle-class cell. At the height of the trials, they would squeeze up to 4 to 5 people in a space this small. And as you can see, it is clearly a lot smaller compared to the upper